Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Ben Johnson. I'm president of Ben Johnson Law PLC. We have offices in Detroit, Grand Rapids, and Flint. Also in the room today, joining us is my partner and managing partner in Flint, Tom Wan, W-A-U-N. We're handling this case, the what we call the Midland flood cases, out of our Flint office. And so Tommy is here helping me and will be here to answer any questions you folks may have. At the table with me are three of our clients. On my right, but your screen left, if you will, is Kurt Yaki. Kurt lives here in the Midland area and is a great football coach in the area, and he'll tell you about his circumstances where he lives in the Midland Dow High School area. In the middle, we have Mike Callan, C-A-L-L-A-N. Mike lived just below the Edenville Dam, and Mike can certainly share with you and will share with you what tragedy he and his family went through. And a number of the photos that we have on the big screen came directly from Mike's property that we all toured less than a week or so after that. And on my immediate right, the left of the screen, is Carl Hammond. Carl lives in downtown Sanford, is on the Sanford Village, if you will, Council, thank you. I couldn't find that word, Carl. And he's right down the street, likewise, from the Edenville Dam, and we'll give you folks an overview. The quick format is I want them to share their stories, and obviously you folks know on Wednesday is May 19, 2021, 1 year later after this travesty that these folks have not only thankfully survived, but nearly 10,000 other property owners here in this area have likewise survived. And that's just the folks that we know about that are asserting claims through about 20 to 25 law firms that I'll address a little bit more later. There's a lot more folks who are not pursuing those claims, but these folks are, and I wanted you to hear from them a year later about what they went through and what their struggles remain today. So let's start with, if we don't mind, Mike, let's start with you because you're up at the Edenville Dam 2 years ago on Wednesday. Give us your overview, sir, and tell us how you folks are doing now.
Well, we're slowly but surely. Currently rebuilding a new place on a new location. Still struggling though financially with rebuild, money for rebuild for a new place. Currently still have a mortgage on the old place that's pretty large still. Struggling with the mortgage company and trying to keep up on that financially, running the business. Just been tough. It's been tough all the way through, but rebounding and trying to move forward.
Mike, just very, very briefly, tell the folks what type of property you had right there by the Edenville Dam and
Yeah, I'm located on 595 West Curtis Road on the Curtis Road Bridge. We had a big farmhouse there, 2,400 square foot farmhouse with 2 pole barns. Quite a bit into it, about $500,000 into it, and lost it all in about 12.5 minutes.
Some of the photos you folks will see in again on the big screen, you're going to see trees. All of that is again from Mike's property, but you'll see scarring on the trees that are estimated between 25 and 30 feet off the ground because of all the debris that was being washed down the stream once the Edenville Dam breached. And then further downstream, coming to the Sanford area, Mr. Councilman Carl Hammond. Carl, tell the folks real quick kind of what you've gone through and where you are at now.
Well, on Tuesday afternoon, when we seen that the flood was coming up pretty hard, I was busy downtown in the Sanford area trying to help our local businessmen and our constituents do what they could do to save what they could save. And in the meantime, at about, matter of fact, I just showed Ben on my phone, the message came through from our county commissioner to move that the Edenville Dam failed and breached. In that period of time, you had about 45 we had about 45 minutes before it hit US 10 and the Sanford Dam. I was literally standing about 5 feet from the dam when it released, trying to talk my neighbor into moving before we both died. My house is literally a block from the Sanford Dam. I sustained 51 inches in the main floor. And so I lost everything that I've worked for about 50 years. Went out the windows, out the doors, found some of my stuff about half a mile down the road. So in the meantime, I've been rebuilding just like everybody in the community that has been rebuilding. We lost about 10% of our residency in the village of Sanford, and we lost 78% of our businesses for the last year. Some of them are coming back and some of them aren't. My house I'm rebuilding. I'm doing it all by myself. It's been a struggle, but I'm retired, so I have lots of time to do that. Oh, wait a minute, I'm a councilman for the village, so I have a little bit less time. But the struggle is real. The finances and making it back is real. And I'm fortunate because I'm able to do it. There's a lot of people that can't do it. So those are people that are really struggling. So I'm still rebuilding. I was out of my house for 2 days. I had an evacuate for 2 days. I was fortunate enough. I had an upstairs in the house. I lived in the house from the second day on. 32 days on generator. I burned up one generator, but we were cleaning out, mucking out, and rebuilding from the second day of the event, along with trying to rebuild the village. So it's very passionate for me because I've got a lot of people that I see that went through some real horrendous situations, and I just want people to know that we're coming back, and we'll have a celebration this week to commemorate the loss that we served or seen 1 year ago this week.
Thank you very much. Further coming down the river now, Kurt Yaki is a lawyer in town and also, as I said, a high school football coach at Midland High. Kurt, can you kind of share with the folks a little bit about what you folks went through, please?
Certainly. My connection with the community, I had 48 years as a volunteer football coach, and I love this town. What happened to us that day was that in all the prior floods, our home, which is just a mile from here, never had any water. And it was this event that caused us to lose the house and everything. Hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so we stayed in 5 different places in this year, and maybe 6 before we end up moving into a condo that we're building out. I couldn't, at my age, I didn't really want to spend 2 years or more trying to rebuild a house that we absolutely loved. And so as a consequence, we, as I said, we sold it as is, and those people are doing the best they can, but it's a struggle for those with those homes. And I would say that it is an experience at the moment, because we left in an instant too. That I'm old enough now where I can say that there are a lot of things that have had huge impact over the years, but there's nothing like being told by the authorities, get out of your house now. And coming back a couple days later and seeing the place that you love is gone. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to spend a couple of moments sharing with you some important dates that is part of the lawsuit that our firm, as well as our partners, Romanucci and Blandon, it's a great firm in Chicago, Illinois, that is our partner in these cases, that we've learned that these folks know firsthand, but maybe some of you folks may not. When the Boyce entities bought this dam in 2004, it didn't take long for them to have significant problems that all had to do with what they call the spillway capacity, or in other words, that the amount of space on the side of the dam was not enough so that when there was a flood, not just if, but when, that space would be utilized and free so that all the debris that ultimately washed out so many of our clients' homes and businesses wouldn't be there. In June of 2017, so less than 2 years before this flood, it got so bad that the federal agency, we call it FERC, and when FERC was so fed up with the Boyce entities that they started threatening and ultimately were successful in revoking their hydroelectric license. So what you have is a federal agency, instead of taking these people to task and actually forcing them to do the job of fixing the dams, which according to FERC, and I'm quoting in a FERC document from February of 2018, failure of the Edenville Dam could result in the loss of human life and the destruction of property and infrastructure. Prophetic words. And not only did FERC know that and were threatening to revoke the license, which they ultimately did in September of 2018, but the state of Michigan, by the way of the Attorney General, actually took part in these proceedings. And actually were ultimately trying to stall FERC into not revoking the license, because guess who's on the hook, y'all? If in fact FERC pulls the license, and it's the state of Michigan. So in a weird way, at that time, you had Boyce and our Attorney General working together against FERC to delay pulling the license. Inevitably, in September of 2018, FERC pulled the license and the state of Michigan took over as the supervising agency, with FERC having, of course, no more say into it. And what we then see for the next year and a half is delay, defend, deny, and pushing off any type of meaningful, forced, if you will, if necessary, by way of court orders, which is under Michigan law possible. You had absolute nothing being done but politicians shaking hands and making backroom deals and doing nothing for the folks in this room and our nearly 300 other clients and the nearly 10,000 other people asserting claims. So ultimately, what we have in this case is a consummate failure by so many different folks. But when the lawsuits were filed, we filed in two different areas. In state court here, literally right next door at the courthouse in Midland, our claim against the Boyce entities. And we also filed a claim in what we call the Michigan Court of Claims. If you sue the state, you can only do it if they tell you that it's okay. It's called governmental immunity. And if you sue the state, you have to do it in a separate court called the Court of Claims. So we had two different lawsuits on behalf of our clients in two different tracks. Other folks, not us, but other folks have a case pending in front of Judge Ludington in federal court in Bay City. All these lawsuits being filed pretty much at the same time in the late summer, early fall of last year. You all know Boyce entities filed immediate bankruptcy relief, and ultimately that was not granted until the last week of February 2021. So it took 6 months in order for all that to go through. Everybody had lawyers, of course, bankruptcy lawyers. It's a federal proceeding, very complicated. Ultimately, that is now going through. What does that mean for the litigation? Boyce is gone. Boyce has a $3 million insurance policy. It's going to be thrown into a big pot. And for all the loss in this case, it'll be completely nothing. So in essence now, Boyce is going to be gone and dismissed from these lawsuits. And we now have two major lawsuits left over on behalf of all these folks, likely more to be added, but one in the Court of Claims against the state of Michigan, and two in federal court pertaining to the employees from FERC, who of course knew and predicted this would happen and simply, we think, bailed as opposed to pushing this private corporation to make the repairs that had to be done. So that's kind of where we are today. In the Court of Claims, we argued a motion November. I actually, on behalf of the folks that have filed these claims, argued it in court before Judge Cynthia Stevens. Judge Stevens is on the Michigan Court of Appeals. She is also on the Court of Claims. She is the judge to which we are assigned, to whom we are assigned this case. Judge Stevens heard those arguments and she is in the midst of writing her opinion. So we don't have a decision yet. We expect it could be any day. And then I will obviously be happy to share that with you folks, and we can comment from there. Likely what's going to happen, folks, is we, of course, feel very strongly that we should win. We hope to win. And if we do, the state of Michigan is going to do what they do in every case. When you sue the state of Michigan, they're going to appeal. And unfortunately, the way that the law is written, we call it the rocket docket. They have an automatic right of appeal, which normal citizens don't have. And that means almost assuredly for a year and a half, we'll be spun off into appeal, waiting for 3 other Court of Appeals judges to look what Judge Stevens on the Court of Appeals has already done, and therefore further delay what you folks know. And if it looks like a footprint or a redo of the Flint water, that's exactly what is happening. And the state is doing it in the same way. And that's why one of many reasons why we're asking you folks as part of this 1-year acknowledgement of all the suffering that these folks in mid-Michigan have gone through, a call to action to step forward and let people know, both in Washington and in our state capital, Lansing, that we don't want a repeat of Flint. Flint, we all heard about the settlement figure of $643 million or so. Not a single cent has been given to the victims in Flint yet. 6.5 years later. That's not what we want. That's not what the people of mid-Michigan need. So we're here to, again, ask folks to reach out on we have a website, venfights.com/Midland. If you don't know who your local legislators are in Lansing and or in Washington, go on that website, venfights.com/Midland. And we have a legislative finder so you can figure out who that is. Make a phone call. Make numerous phone calls, send an email, send a letter. We've got proposed language. You don't have to, you can do your own language. But if you don't know what to say, we give you some ideas of what these folks need to hear about, from Governor Whitmer all the way to Dana Nessel, the Attorney General, to, of course, our United States Legislator Debbie Dingell, John Molinar, who have proposed legislation in the federal system last December. And what we hear is there's some stuff in the makings here in Michigan and the state court, likewise about legislation. And the number one thing that we don't want, folks, is a legislative fix that doesn't include the victims of this entire event. Our folks have not only been paying mortgages, but property taxes on property that's no longer worth anything of what they purchased. We have folks who bought places on the lake because the lakefront property, as we all know in Michigan, is something very special, that no longer have a lake, but they have a stream or they have a mud patch. So what we're trying to do is remind people again that the proposed fix that we hear about on the dam is to tax these people over the course of the next 20 to 30 years so they can pay for the fix that the state should have taken care of when they had over a year and a half to do something about it. Again, we understand there's going to be a lot of things discussed, but one of the things that has got to be discussed is we need to take into consideration the folks, the victims who have gone through all this, not just a year ago on Wednesday, but continue to go through it every single day here today. So that's kind of where we're at, and where we're trying to end this whole thing, if you will, is to allow folks to see and feel the reality of what these folks went through and to ask you for your help. These folks in their communities have done a phenomenal job of helping each other. I'm from Saginaw, so I get the mid-Michigan toughness and so forth, and the grit, and how they all helped each other. And literally, when you hear the stories, each one of these 3, I went to their homes shortly after this. I saw what their homes looked like. I saw what they all were going through in order just to try to clean up this just incredible fiasco, which should have been avoided, could have been avoided. We want you to think about that, but we also want you to think about them. And even if you're not from this area, make that call, send that email, and demand in Washington and in Lansing that we do something to help these folks and make sure that they are part of the solution, that they don't get lost in legislation and politics. Because if there's one thing that I think we can all agree, reaching across, we hear that all the time, reaching across the aisle, these folks deserve everybody to be on the same page. So I'd be happy to have any questions that you folks may have. Tom Wan is also in the room. He can answer questions, but I'd love to hear it. If you want to ask questions of our clients, you're welcome to do that.
I have a question about how simple of a fix would it have been if someone along the way had done something with the Eagle Dam?
Well, they knew what they had to do. They had to expand the spillway. How simple and how expensive is something that's going to be hotly contested, of course. It's not, nothing is easy, but it would have taken time, but they knew about this for years. So they knew what they had to do. The feds completely told them for years, you've got to do something or it's going to result in this loss of human life and property. And plain and simple, they weren't making enough, voice entities weren't making enough profit in their opinion to pay for the fix, so they just didn't. And the question then becomes is, what are you going to do, government, when you know you have somebody, a bad actor, who's absolutely threatening lives and the, right, in terms of just not human life. Think of all the wildlife, think of all the property. What are you going to do? And the fact of the matter is, we have courts for that very reason. What we should have done is we should have pushed that button, gone to court and made them, or if not, forced a sale to get somebody in there who was going to make the fix. But in 2019, when the state, actually 2018, when the state of Michigan took over, they knew all this. They knew they had a bad actor. They knew they had already gone through this stuff with the FERC, because the state of Michigan was involved, ladies and gentlemen. And that's something that the state of Michigan hasn't really been very clear on so far. They were involved in the last few years. They knew FERC was pulling that license, so they knew what they had to do. So once that switch turned on to the state of Michigan in September of 2018, we should have been all over this, and we blew it. And so that's why we believe the state of Michigan is the one ultimately, as well, we hope that's as well, needs to step up and take responsibility for what happened.
You talked about, you kind of alluded to the flood water crisis a little bit and sort of the similarities between the two. How do you expect to kind of move forward and kind of put the pressure to the court system to kind of move forward, because they're inherently slow, no matter where we are around the state?
Great question. This case, folks, in terms of what happened in Flint, the title of the case, we call it the theory of recovery, is called inverse condemnation. Fancy words for when your government takes your property without compensating you for it. We all know, we can think about it, if we have a property and there's no highway going through, and all of a sudden they want to come in and take your property for a highway. Well, they're going to take it, but they got to pay you for it. And then you can have a lawsuit and fight about the value. That's what Flint was. So we have a blueprint that the state of Michigan knows about, because now they're at the settlement phase of that 6.5 years later. It's insane for us to repeat the same mistake again and do the same thing to these folks here in Midland, in my opinion. Our claim in this case is inverse condemnation. It's identical. The #1 case that I argued in front of Judge Stevens, when the state of Michigan, mind you, all taxpayers here, the state of Michigan is paying their lawyers to defend and pay these people zero money. It blows my mind. But the argument was Flint. We have not only the state lawsuits in what happened, but we have federal precedent, as we call it, lawsuits in terms of the courts that said, no, this needs to go to trial. It looks like the government may have done this wrong. So there is, in our opinion, zero reason to do the same thing. We believe it's going to follow the same path. We believe we're going to be successful. So instead of paying our government, paying lawyers to hide, defend, and delay and deny all this money from the folks who need it the most, they don't need it 6.5 years from now. They need that money now. Hence, we're asking you folks, as part of this acknowledgement of what these folks have been through over the last years, make that a part of it. Take that, go on fenfights.com/Midland, find your legislature in the unlikely event you don't know. If you do know, we're happy to have you write a letter, email, make a phone call, 2 or 3 or 4. Help these folks get the money. And the only way we all know it works is pressure, political pressure. And that's what constituents, voters out there telling the folks making these decisions, we need your help. We demand you do something. Long answer, but I hope I got to.
Ben, we have a question through the website. Beth LeBlanc asks, just to clarify, Voices Bankruptcy will distribute about $3 million to victims, ? How many people will that money be distributed to?
Okay, well, not just victims, Beth. Unfortunately, in any bankruptcy, there's other creditors that voice entity had. So you got banks involved. So and the $3 million that I'm talking about is just, if you will, insurance dollars. There may be a few dollars above that, but not much. And so the answer is the folks, my clients and the nearly 10,000 other people making claims on behalf of properties in Gladwin, Midland, and Saginaw counties, by the way, are going to see next to nothing.
I have a question that kind of follows up on that.
Sir.
I noticed a lot of reaction on the table about voice hybrid, how they're just filed for bankruptcy, and it seems like that's it. Is there going to be anything that happens to them in the future that might hold them more responsible?
Great question. The state of Michigan, interestingly enough, for some reason, the song Too Little Too Late comes to mind. Sorry, I'm dating myself, guys. But the state of Michigan, back in April this year, is going after the boys entities for a $15 million fine for what they did wrong at Edenville Dam. A year later, after the floods, a $15 million fine that they're levying against a bankrupt entity. Now, if there's ever showboat, and what you're seeing is this, the number one defense the state of Michigan is going to have in this lawsuit is to point the finger and blame at Boyce. And is Boyce to blame as well? The answer is yes. But under a lawsuit setting, once someone that goes bankrupt, it goes through in the federal court, they're done. You can't sue them for anything else. It's over. So the state of Michigan, we call it the empty chair defense, right, Kurt? And it happens all the time in court, but they're going to point the finger and make the state's the bad guy, state's the bad guy, or excuse me, state's going to say Boyce. But interestingly enough, the only person in the Boyce entity, folks, who has not been discharged is Lee Mueller, who's the trustee of that. And there's a lot of reasons. I'll leave it to Mr. Mueller and his lawyer to explain to you guys. They'll never tell you, I'm sure, why they're doing this. But he's actually countersued the state of Michigan for all the state has done and was doing wrong, including rising the water levels, if you will, right before the flood, knowing full well that the spillways were in violation of state and federal law, and these poor folks lived it. So it's going to be a lot of finger pointing to answer your question, but in terms of court liability, zero after the bankruptcy went through on February, I think it was 25, 2021, sadly.
Then, given that you're likely not to get anything from Boyce, do you have a dollar amount on what you'd like to see the state pay with this lawsuit?
Thank you for that question. I wrote a letter, folks, on April 30, 2021 that I have for everyone's review in the back of the courtroom. I did it not just on behalf of the Johnson Law, nearly 300 clients, but again, on behalf of what we call the Plaintiff Steering Committee. That's the 20-some law firms that are bringing these cases. And there's 3 lawyers who have been chosen. I'm one of them, with Butch Hollowell, the Paul Miller firm, and also Ted Leopold of Cohen Milstein Sellers. I want to give them shout outs and thank them for all their help. I wrote this letter to Senator Stabenow and Senator Peters, our U.S. senators in Washington, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and Attorney General Dana Nessel. I'm also going to be this week sending this letter to U.S. Representatives in Washington, Debbie Dingell and John Molinar as well for that very thing. And what we're going to be asking for is literally there's billions of dollars of losses here. Folks, the losses not just happened on that day, but as I wanted you to hear yourselves today from my clients, they continue evolving even through today. These folks are rebuilding from next to nothing, or they're going to a new place having to build. They wouldn't be building that house if they didn't go through a complete catastrophic loss of everything they had at the other property. Or in Carl's case, luckily he had that second floor because everything else below the second floor was obliterated. And the house, by the way, across the street, completely gone.
One behind me, gone.
So the fact of the matter is, the letter that we're hoping is to bring attention to, ladies and gentlemen, our state and federal legislators, executive, whatever, all you folks, we know the courts, to get back to your question, sir, we know the courts move slowly. This is what I do, is what Kaki does, and the courts can only move as slowly or as quickly as they can because of appellate process. If there's going to be a fix, as it's called, if it's going to be legislative, it's going to be laws passed in state or federal, and we're all hearing about infrastructure right now, if we right, both state and federal news. What better way, folks, for infrastructure dollars to be spent in going back in and assisting the rebuild of the Edenville and Sanford dams? and restoring this area as best it can be to what it was, and hopefully even better and safer for the folks, and hope that their properties will come back to life a little bit, even though, of course, as you heard from Carl and Mike and Kurt, the business is being so shot. So we believe it's billions of dollars. I've been kind of disappointed over the last year. Every time I see someone from the state, it went from billions now to a few million. I mean, it's interesting how once the state sued, how that figure shrunk. But I will assure you, with over 10,000 property losses and ongoing, we believe billions with a B.
If the state knew how bad this was back in 2018, when they did get involved, why do you think they didn't act quicker to stop this?
Well, the state was involved before 2018. They just got stuck with it in September of 2018 when the inevitable happened and FERC pulled the license from Boyce. The answer is because they were sitting around tables, in my opinion, talking about the future and, oh, yeah, let's get to it. They say, well, they took $5 million and said, okay, ultimately, we'll use this money to do this, but we'll get that done by 2024. How'd that work for the folks in May 19 of 2020? So literally from the beginning, there was nothing done. The number one problem that the state knew that they had were two things. Spillways were too small, and they had the owners unwilling to pay a dime to do anything. So the state had to come in on day one. They already saw how the feds went through the court proceedings to withdraw their license, and that it had absolutely no effect on the Boyce entities whatsoever. So why do the same thing all over again? And that's why I say literally it's insane, repeating the same behavior and expecting there to be a different result. It wasn't going to be, state needed to come in, get judicial relief from the courts, and absolutely find a way to fix it. Or in my opinion, states should have come in and done it themselves. And then absolutely none of this would have happened to any of these folks, and we wouldn't be talking about it a year later with, by the way, not a dime for the majority of these people. And I want to address something I've read. I don't read blogs very much because of this very reason, because I get too upset. But well, they got insurance. Really? No flood insurance. The overwhelming majority of my clients, ladies and gentlemen, that's just to get 300, let alone 10,000. The story that we've heard over and over again, these folks asked for flood insurance because some of them, Kurt Yaki said he didn't have water in 2017. Others did. This is not a flood zone, so they were not being sold insurance. So the overwhelming majority of our clients got no relief. And by the way, if they did get some relief from an insurance company, it was pennies on the dollar. Welcome to dealing with insurance companies. And so the majority, overwhelming majority of these 10,000 property owners have gotten nada, despite a year later.
Kind of on the same thing, why do you think the state is not expediting the process? What's stopping them from kind of acting quicker when they didn't act quickly the first time?
Well, as a 35-year lawyer, that's what the gray's for. And the answer is delay, defend, deny. That's what they do, right? And if you didn't have to pay something, I try to explain this to clients and it's maddening. If you're not being held accountable, if a court doesn't say you have to pay somebody, you don't have to pay somebody under the law, ladies and gentlemen. Then someone sues you, then you have to go to trial, you have to win a trial, and then you have to get this piece of paper called a judgment, and then you try to collect on the judgment. Years, appeals. So if the state doesn't have to pay the money until years down the road, then so be it. Then they'll worry about, then there'll be a different governor, it'll be a different attorney general, there's already been a switch from when this whole thing started. So the answer is because the system allows for it. And that's why we're asking for everybody's help out there in our call to action. Get on the website, venfights.com/Midland. Find your legislature, give them a call, multiple calls, emails, and letters, and we can get it done together. These folks would really appreciate it, and they need your help.
My question's for you three gentlemen. Are you mad? Do you feel like you're screaming into the wind here?
Talk freely for once.
Yeah, I'm mad. And because of what Ben said, and I've given Ben a lot of information, I've been in Midland County since '67, been a resident since '93. This is nothing new. This is information that we locally, and I sit on the council, I've been on the council since 2006. This is something we knew. We've talked about it. We practiced it 6 months before.
Practice what?
We practiced the dam failure 6 months before, in August and September of 2019, the two counties, Gladwin County and Midland County, all the emergency services, first responders, all the government agencies, we did a mock-up of what if.
It wasn't if, it was when.
It was when. And the damn people were there, we were there to put together a plan and to see how this would roll out. It was not pretty in the mock-up because we had all 4 dams fail. We had tens of thousands of lives lost. We lost Northwood, we lost the hospital, we lost Dow, we lost the water. This was a real scenario. We did phone calls, we had 911 involved. So we reacted, we did an actual mock-up action as simulated. It was a 2-day deal over 2 weeks. From that, the pinging of the phones was developed, the sirens were developed, the warning systems were developed to get out or die. And that's what the first responders said. We do not have rapid response teams for what's going to happen. We were guessing. We were just guessing. Everybody was guessing. Nobody's been through this ever before. Well, what happened, happened. Everybody knows what happened. I lost my house. I was standing 500 feet from the dam when Sanford Dam let loose, trying to convince my neighbor he needed to get out or we're both going to die. We were going out in knee-deep water as we're driving out of downtown Sanford. Boise Hydroelectric knew this, Wolverine Power Company knew this, and FERC knew this, and the state knew this, that they were not in compliance and could not surpass a 500-year flood, what they call a 500-year flood or major flood event. We knew this. We were fortunate enough to never lost one person.
Mike, could have been prevented. I believe it could have been prevented. Mad, yes. Upsetting, yes. I mean, it was 35 years of my life that, to get where I was at at that point. I mean, we lived on the other side of the lake, 5 years ago, moved over to Curtis Road, bought this farmhouse, 650 foot of lakefront. We had our boats, our toys down the lake, it was kind of like our dream house, put a lot of money into it. Did a lot of landscaping, a lot of that, and then just within a matter of minutes, it was gone, and nothing to show for it now, no, just a big debt, and so mad, yes, upsetting, yes, but, I really believe this could have been prevented, and it wasn't, and it's not, and here we stand now, waiting for answers that, like Vince said, could be years, and in the meantime, they're focused on trying to bring the lakes and the dams and all that back, but victims and homeowners, I mean, here we sit, it's upsetting, it's not right.
Kurt? Thank you, brother.
Well, of course, we're angry and upset. In our neighborhood, we have wonderful neighbors and people that spend lots of their time and their money contributing to this community. And of course, they're angry because they lost their home. And we lost our neighborhood. Almost everyone that I used to know very well has scattered to the 4 winds because of this. So, of course, people are angry. There's quite a bit of remorse and the feeling that essentially they trusted others to take care of a known problem, and it wasn't true.
Any other questions? I want to thank everybody for being here. This means the world to these gentlemen and all of our clients. Again, not just Johnson Law clients, but on behalf of the 10,000 folks who are asserting these claims. Again, we beg, we ask, we implore you, make that phone call, send that letter, send that email, keep following up, put the pressure on Washington Lansing, and let's try to get a fix that takes into consideration the victims of everything that they've gone through and what they will continue to go through for years to come. I want to thank you folks for being here. I want to thank Near Perfect Media for all that they did yesterday and today. Sarah Lacricchio of Near Perfect Media will be handling any questions that you folks may have when we're concluding here in a minute. You're welcome to stay around for again, for as long as you'd like, talk with us, Tom Juan and me and our clients. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate it.